Welcome to this Connect News Byte podcast recorded on the 27th of November 24. I'm David Charles and my News Byte today is titled "And They Also Raise Farmers." This was a title that was inspired by a social media posting which read, "On the farm we raise crops, we raise animals, and we raise farmers." So what's this story about? Clearly farmers. Now, there's been a amount of articles recently about the plight of farmers. These articles have centred on the inheritance tax changes which are destined to change the landscape as far as family-owned farms are concerned. Not surprisingly, and somewhat warmly, people across our nation have spoken out in support of the farmers, and a good many people joined them in their march on London, in their tens of thousands, I should add. It was there farmers and their supporters sought to provide their opinion of the tax law changes for the government to ponder on. The details of these changes have been written about at length, and a flavour of them can be found in the links section in the PDF version of this article. Among the links are details of the actual changes now laid down by Rachel Reeves, Chancellor. That said, as is the rule of life, there are two sides to every coin, and that opposite side turned up, like a bad penny as some might say, in a comment which surfaced on social media in opposition, I guess. It read, speaking directly to the farmers, "Yes, agreed, but you also pollute our rivers with nitrates and faces, spray pesticides which kill our pollinators, birds and other wildlife, cause flooding by stripping out hedges and trees and poor ploughing practices, block footpaths, prevent access to the countryside, spread mud and feces on our roads, block our roads with giant tractors and harvesters, keep us rural dwellers awake at night operating machinery at all hours, allow hunting on your land. You've killed 230,000 badgers, the majority, 96% of which did not have bovine TB. You are responsible for propagating bird flu via industrial chicken farms. You don't pay the same inheritance tax as we do. You don't pay council tax like we do, and you get billions in subsidies paid by the rest of us. So yes, it's great you produce some, not all, of the food we eat, but you are also massively privileged. You are not the only people working hard or unsociable hours, and your work is not the only important work being done." That's end of quote. This social media comment is written in the style of a rant, as you will detect, but all comments are worth a listen to, since there's nearly always something to be learned, observed, or considered more deeply. Even if 95% of a rant is off target, irrelevant, or just plain wrong, however wrong is measured, 5% can highlight a gem not considered in depth before by anyone. In this case, I add a few thoughts of my own, honouring the writer in their opinion, but endeavouring to add something maybe deserving of looking at in depth. Being a passionate believer in the value of debate, this subject would make a cracking topic for such, but then only if all participants attended with the objective to discover and then agree the real and substantiated truth of the matter. Debates should not be about winners and losers, so much as about what is found to be right or true. In my book, this is called intelligent debate, and quite different to the adversarial debate we see daily in the Commons debating chamber in Westminster, depressing for many of us. So then, a few thoughts of my own. I believe farmers do their utmost best for their animals and the environment, measured in terms of laid down standard practices and obligations. There is, however, good reason to look deeply at those standard practices and obligations to see how appropriate and fitting they are. As for mud and feces on the road, that's not limited to farmers, of course, but is a feature of rural living, which many, most probably, accept as okay. As for allowing hunting on their land, some do, some don't, and some don't even get to be asked. The problem with hunting is not a farmer's issue, of course. If hunting is against the law, then hunting is against the law. There are other routes available to prevent illegal hunting. The badger topic is another government dictate, of course. The industrial farming thing is interesting and is really again about standard practices and obligations. Farmers do what farmers do within the constraints laid down by others, the government. This is another issue which would benefit wider debate by the public, which should brace itself for additional costs of the food products, and not unfairly, of course. Billions in subsidies is another interesting question. The EU agricultural policy is seen by many as the most imperfect political strategy ever, and all the policies which stem from that legislation, including since Brexit, is now ripe for critical review. The point to keep in mind is that this nation needs food. It needs producers of that food, and ideally that food will be produced in good quality at a reasonable price for both the producer and the consumer. To start here with debate, for me at least, would make good sense. The inheritance tax thing is interesting indeed. There are few industries like this one where the sons and daughters are raised in a farming family to become the next generation of farming-loving farmers. Farming isn't an industry that attracts many from outside. Sons and daughters grow up with a love for what their parents do and acquire the farming skills along the way. And unlike many other businesses, which we all have a choice to pursue, farming is not something which is sufficiently rewarding to attract tenant farmers. Farm owners can only keep their offspring in farming if they can keep the assets together. In the past, this has been possible, but not now. It seems that the government has changed the rules. For these young farmers with a deep and inherent love of their trade, will need to sell off larger portions of these assets in order to continue farming. The chances of that happening, continuing farming that is, are considered now to be minimal. And then, who will buy those assets? Well, it's unlikely to be other farmers. First in the frame might be house builders, a very healthy money-making business as some would argue. Then there's the solar farmers, gobbling up land to sell on to the consumer solar-powered energy. At what eventual price, we shall learn later. Then there are the factory farmers who are set to benefit from the downturn in food production, meat, dairy and other dry products, in favour of bugs, which certain people in this world want us all to be eating soon, to stop the planet warming to the point of the seas boiling. I'm not sure about anyone else, but given the temperatures experienced in the UK these last few years, I could cope with some global warming. And bug farming is not set to be an occupation undertaken by small farming families, I'm anticipating. Instead, major conglomerates who will love the opportunity to benefit from anticipated exponential growth in this sector. Thinking about growth, this is a topic mouthed by government at every opportunity. But who wants it, other than major corporates owned by major shareholders who seem to have major influence on what governments do and don't do? Most ordinary individuals are happy with just enough, aren't greedy, and not looking to take over the world, unlike major corporates. Another topic for debate I'd suggest right here. A couple more observations to include as last-minute items. There's an interesting story about a South American country that has recently found a hoard of wealth lying off the coast under the seabed. The president's plan is to share the wealth, once realized, with the country's population, wherever they might live in the world. Where have we heard such an idea before? Nowhere, I'd suggest, and certainly not in the UK, where the royal family owns the seabed rights over minerals which lay tapped and untapped around the shores of our islands. My thought here is this: what if all family-owned farmland was instead owned by a farmland trust? Farmers would rent the land they need from the trust, passing on to their offspring rights to continue farming that land. In effect, it's about the people owning a share in the country's assets, not big biz. A debate topic maybe. And finally, there was another story on social media that caught my attention. The once farmer loved his work. He farmed a medium-sized farm, but for all his tireless efforts, only creamed in £40,000 per annum to live on. He wanted, in his heart, to continue, which meant continuing to produce food for people of this country to eat. Ultimately, he gave in to the pressure. He sold his land to a conglomerate for it to become a solar farm, producing alternative energy, not food. He now sips gin and tonics in one of his several homes in Portugal and other places, and spends most days just checking his property portfolio, now producing 10k a month. Ka-ching. I've said for some while, life for many of us is not about collecting wealth, since all of that wealth stays here and never leaves. Instead, good people collect great memories of doing the right thing and inspire others to do similar right things. Those memories we carry with us into our next lives. And this concept sits comfortably with me. So, in a word, this subject is worthy and deserving of being debated, and in a debate where the object is not to contest one argument with another. How foolish an objective that would be. Instead, the object of such a debate is to work out what really is best overall for all concerned. I, for one, would welcome such a debate. But how about you? Thank you for listening to this News Byte today. I hope it's given you further things to think about on this important subject. For further information on this and related subjects, do check out the PDF version, and that's reference NB-4482B for Bravo. It contains a number of links supporting articles, plus links to many other enlightening and fascinating articles on a variety of subjects. Meanwhile, I look forward to sharing my next News Byte with you very soon.